if you can only post one, there is a way to add those other records in Calpads by doing online maintenance and adding the record in Calpads. So let's first look at post-secondary status. So where's this here? Okay, so let's look at one student here. So right now, we've surveyed this student for fall 2. It so happens that this student is also a special ed student. So if you have multiple records for responses for SPED, as this student has shown on during fall 2, you can then submit multiple responses to Calpads. So just you can add a new record. The key elements for end of year 4 are the following. Okay, if Calpads. So you have here the reporting SELPA, the local special education student ID, the participation type, and the post-secondary status. Okay, so these three elements at the bottom that you reported in end of year in fall 2 is not needed for end of year 4. So don't fret about that. So just this one, SELPA, reporting SELPA, local special education ID, and of course, the participation type code, which identifies the record relevant to end of year 4, and then the post-secondary status. Okay. So now that you know what fields to report, let's go back to the Calpads user manual and show you where to look at what additional resources you could take advantage of. So you can either type PSTS on the search field or just go to functionality, online maintenance, student maintenance, and go to post-secondary status details. By clicking on that, it brings you to this section of the PSTS. I know it's hard to just scroll at the bottom, so you could take advantage of link on the left side and look for end of year 4. So again, these are the students that you could survey, and then the survey template is down here. We have a PSTS survey template guide. This taken from Flash 203. So you have the survey template that you could download from here, and then these are the guides that you could also reference. So what fields to use if the student is enlisted in military, who were incarcerated, who were employed, and then if we scroll up for end of year 4, there is a special element that at least CDE or IDEA will use. So based on the school outcomes, it will be used for state performance plan indicator 14. So, if the student has a post-secondary status of higher education, let's say, community college or college degree, or is in a university, that will then be translated to an SPPI 14 outcome.
So
And
if you
of course, and then the state will use that to report, at least report for federal reporting.
scroll up, Kyron, just a little bit, right
Yes.
there, and then the last sentence before the table. Um, I hate to say hierarchy, but one of the reasons why I wanted Tyron to go to the user manual, and this question came up yesterday in our Q&A. It was if you can only, if your said system only will allow you to submit one outcome. There's two options, right? You can always submit your outcome through the API and then add to it through the user manual functionality. That's why Kyron went and demonstrated the functionality real quick, and he can show you where the video is, which is more extensive. But the other one is you can make a hierarchy because you can see how these codes are going to be used. The first code A is higher education. So if you have a student that's at community college and working, and you can only submit one through the API, you want to focus that on the higher education. Then below that, you have competitive employment. So I can't say that this is a specific hierarchy, but you can use it as such if you're trying to determine which outcome you can report if you're only going to report one. Thanks, Kyron. I just wanted to add that.
Yep. And then, of course, you know, just highlighting the functionalities we have on the user manual. There is a data population training. This is updated as well. And there's a module for end of year 4 that you could watch. And so, for PSTS, there are 3 elements here. Who are reported, and this is your list, and how many can be reported, which I believe looking at the chat says now allows a maximum of 3. So now, you don't have to worry about doing online maintenance for at least for SACE folks. But if you do need to do that, if you're using a different vendor, then you may do so. And then what else? I guess that's just for end of year 4 PSTS. If you can refer to this section of the user manual. It provides you all of the elements that was included on Flash 2 203. And you also have the downloadable template here that you could refer to and a guide. So, if you have additional questions with PSTS end of year 4, you could always, send us a ticket and we would gladly help you with that. But again, we want you to be self-reliant. Most of the information are here, and you have the different sections of the Calpads, website that you could refer to, like Flash 203, where we just lifted that information from. And you have other FAQs here too. So,
all right.
Yep. So that should explain post-secondary status. I can't there's not much to explain into detail in terms of the scenarios, because you may have different scenarios that might just be needed for that you need you need to send a ticket for. But in general, these are the resources you could take advantage of, and most of these resources will answer your questions.
Students with disability PSTS data is going to come from your special education system.
That's right.
We're talking about students transition services. They're required at 16, but you can submit them as early as 13 years, 9 months. And so I appreciate you guys correcting me on that. I don't want to give out any misinformation ever, but again, that's why in the beginning we kind of explained we haven't ever worked on the programmatic side of reporting, right? And this was new last year, so please forgive my mistake. And again, I just want to express my appreciation to you all. All right, Kyron, it's your show.
Okay. Thank you, Nate. So I guess everyone's back. I hope you were able to do whatever you needed during those 5 or 7 minute break. So now that we have the data in Calpads, assuming you've already submitted all your data, there are no more submission errors, and now you're ready for certification. So the first thing you need to do, of course, is to go to the certification status page, which we will discuss right now. Go to this section here, which is the certification status, and it brings up your entire certification status for this year. So of course, we're in the end of year 4 submission. So we click on this. And okay, we're in test. So I just want to highlight the different sections of the certification details page, because there are some key elements that are that some LEAs, during the course of the past 2 years, where we've been doing SPED, that LEAs get tripped on when coordinating with their SELPAs in terms of the revisions and all. So let's do this section one by one. So you have here your summary section, and of course, it reveals the most current revision that you're in. Okay, so you have your revision ID, total errors, warnings, And then you also have this tiny one here, tiny element here, which is the revised uncertified version. So the revised this revision status here will allow you to toggle between different versions of the snapshot. So assuming, let's say, you have already LA approved your certification, then and you made corrections without disapproving, then you should be able to see those corrections by toggling your revision status. Okay, so assuming I have LA approved or SELPA approved versions here, by toggling this and choose the correct revision, it then presents the current version of your reports based on the changes that you've made. So if you have revisions as of, let's say, 9 a.m., and you toggle this and there are no new revisions, then that means the changes you made haven't been updated yet in Calpads. And then, of course, if you want to view any errors using the View Certification Error Report, you could click on this and it should bring up your error here, and then you could just export this into Excel or whatever format you have. And okay, we have this on test right now. So and that should allow you to send whatever errors you have to whoever needs to correct the errors. Let's say your SPED person. Okay, and then of course your SPED person will be able to make the corrections on their end. Okay. So going down, you have here your required SELPA approval. So here, my SELPA is ABC Unified. And of course, our status has not been SELPA approved yet because we're currently on the revised uncertified status. Then we have here certification validations. This is where you will be able to see all your cert errors that will appear after you've submitted all your data. So there are two, for those new to Calpads, there are two versions of errors. You have your submission errors, which trigger based on the records in the files that you submit in Calpads during upload. Now that, and then there's the CVR, which is the certification errors. And this is a new set of errors. If you think you're done with correcting errors during upload, there might be some other errors that may trigger based on the overall data validation. So what CalPAS does is it looks at the existing SPED record, at least for end of year 4, and relates it to different rules within CalPads in relation to other documents like your SCNR or enrollment records or any demographic record like the birth date. So it triggers those errors based on in relation to the other data that currently exists in CalPads. So don't be alarmed if you have all of these errors, because chances are you will have one if there are some discrepancies between file types. Okay, we'll discuss the error resolution in a bit. And then of course you may have certification warnings. So you have this too. This is just, you know, you really don't need to resolve this if you don't have to, but these are some indicators that there might be some discrepancies or there might be some data that you also have to upload. Even if it's just a warning, sometimes you need to make corrections in Calpads. Okay. And then of course you have your certification reports section. These are the reports you need to review. You have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 reports, aggregate reports. These are the aggregate reports that you need to review to before CalPads will allow you to click on the LA approve button, assuming you don't have any certification errors. Okay. And then, of course, you don't just review this without reviewing the supporting reports. So in any case, you review all reports. And once you've ascertained that the data on those reports are correct, the counts and the students listed are all accurate, then by all means, certify if you have 0 errors. Once you've reviewed all of this, an LA approve button will appear on this section. So actually, once you've reviewed all of this, a tiny button here will that you need to check will appear. You have to check that, sign ascertaining that all the data that you've submitted and reflected on the reports are correct, and then that would allow you to click on an LA approve button that will appear here. Okay. And then the last section, which is actually crucial this year, since we've introduced additional columns on the SELPA side of these reports, are the revision ID and revision create date. So for this year, when you try to coordinate any changes and tell yourself, okay, I made revisions to my report. There's now a new revised and certified status version. I would suggest copying the revision ID of your revised and certified and giving that to them, because on their side, on the SELPA, when they review the report, there will be a revision ID. If they're reviewing multiple LEAs, when they run, let's say, 16.1 or whatever reports here, each LEA will have a revision ID that they could look at and see, okay, so this is the revision ID I need to review, or yeah, and that would help them be able to determine that they're looking at the right version of your report. Okay,
And
so yeah, Nate.
Kyra was good to point out the revision ID. At the end of fall one, we had asked everyone to certify to meet the initial deadline and disabled a lot of SPED errors. Then coming out of the holiday break, it was a scramble for the month of January and then February to try to get everyone to go back, resolve the existing SPED errors, and then approve the new revision of reports. And it's because there's a nuance. And that's why the revision ID is so important. When you're looking at the revision status toggle, there's a delay. So you will click revision status and think, if you have 0 errors, you'll think you're on the new status. That's why it's important to double check the revision ID and to make sure the revision ID represents what you want. You have the revision create date. It tells you when this was created and the revision ID. Because what happens is, if you just look at the status date of approval, you could have approved a old report thinking it was the new report. That's why the create date's important. That's why the unique IDs specified for that revision is important to make note of. So you can make sure that when you have multiple versions of your reports, that's multiple revisions, you can be sure to certify the data that you want, and then you can communicate with your SELPA or your administration. This is the particular report or set of reports we're looking at. This is the data. Be sure to look at the revision ID and the create date. I will share and just cover the errors real quick.
Oh, actually, I could do errors now. We can look at the reports later when we do that. That's a good point.
And so Kyron's going to demonstrate how to resolve an error, but I took control because I just wanted to show you the different errors. And I want those of you who are submitting SPED data to see there are less. Like the CERT 132, that was a big headache in fall one. That was disabled because it's not as relevant for end of year. It's a warning. If you don't resolve it as a warning, it will come back for fall one next year. But there have been changes from last year to this year and from fall one to now. And so we just wanted to highlight that there are a little bit different errors. Some of them were made warnings for end of year 4 because we don't want them to prevent the submission, but they're not going to stay warnings. They're just warnings for this submission. They'll be fatals again in fall 1. So keep that in mind. Often we look at our fatal errors and we don't address the warnings. I think there's a value in addressing the warnings if they can be addressed. But certainly if you look at the bottom 167 Gen Ed percentage range code must be populated. Perhaps the last time a student had a meeting, they were 4. and now that student's 5, that warning is going to trigger. But if you have a meeting over the summer or in the beginning of next year before census day, that record will resolve the 167 for fall 1. You just need to take account of which students are going to need a meeting. Even if it's not their annual meeting, you're going to have a problem in fall 1 because this student is 5 and has a SPED record, and you're not telling us how much time they're in general education percentage range. It's a warning now, but it's going to be a headache for fall 1. So you can use those warnings now to kind of inventory which students are going to need. Maybe it's just an amendment to the record and you update it, right? You don't necessarily have to have a meeting. You just can make an amendment. But that's just, something to look out for when you're looking at your cert errors. I'm not going to go through every one. Kind of moving away from that. If you have a specific question, we can go through it. But this is a good time for Kyron to demonstrate the troubleshooting process and show you the YouTube videos as a resource. So Kyron, you can take control again. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. So let's go back to the certification details section and go to certification errors. So we have here 2 cert errors. You have one regarding a student with no race and ethnicity data, and Cert 140, which is a student with a SPED record but does not have an SSRV record or services. So let's look at this record. There are, when troubleshooting errors, there are one tool that you have to go to be able to troubleshoot error, which is the Calpads error list. There are 2 ways to go to that section of the error list. Well, actually 3 ways, but we've added this functionality at least this year, wherein if you click on these error number, it brings up a the actual error on the user manual. It also provides you any active defects related to that and some suggested resolution. So this is just a iteration of the actual error list. But if you want to download the error list and look at it the old school way, which is through the spreadsheet, you could do that. To download the error list, you could always just scroll to the bottom of Calpads and click on error list. Or you could, if you're in the Calpads user manual, I'm doing all of these shameless plugs of the user manual, but these are some stuff that you could refer to. So you could go to troubleshooting under help, and you have an index of all the errors, and also you could download the error list here, which is fine. And then you also have a tutorial on how to use the error list. So we're giving all of these tools. It's just a matter of you looking at it, making sure you're comfortable with using the tools, and that's basically it. So for Cert 140, if you click on here, oh, I didn't put it over here. So normally we would also add additional YouTube videos here under additional information for end of year. So we might add that for the Cert 140 because we've added that before. But there should be a video here, but there is another option that you could refer to, is the Calpads YouTube videos. So let's go to Calpads. So from the user manual, you can just go to our CSIS channel, and then we have troubleshooting videos here. Where's that? Troubleshooting.
And so
You can just type Cert 140.
And kind of using the tools is knowing how they're set up. So when you land on the home screen, Marshall and Slyman just put collections of videos. So end of year data population video could help somebody with end of year. At the bottom, they have last year's end of year reporting certifications. Then the next videos tab is a list of all the videos by upload date. So these are the most current videos. And then you have playlists. And playlists is where you would find the error videos. There's cert errors and there's submission error videos. And Kyron was showing you the shortcut that we most often, you can see error correction. You have Calpads documentation in the middle, certification, but Kyron just showed you the shortcut if you're looking for something specific. Sorry, Kyron.
Writing's
Okay,
not
so we
that
have
easy,
here,
but Grammarly can help.
okay,
This sentence
to the
is
We have
a
here is a commercial.
yep. So
I am going to select
So we have
Elliot to
here Nate
demonstrate.
explaining the CERT 140 video. Okay, you can jump when we're trying to resolve issues. You could always search on the YouTube channel if there are any pre-made videos of troubleshooting. But let's go back to the error and let's troubleshoot this old school way. So you can click on that. It gives you the explanation. It's just saying that okay, you have a SPED student but you're missing the SSRV. So let's go here and click on show to see who the students are. Oh, but
You're in the SELPA, not the
oh,
LEA.
okay, okay, yeah. Okay, that's another troubleshooting issue that we're explaining right now. So I'm essentially on under SELPA. So if I switch, I should be able to go back and look at the error. Let's go back there.
So
So
if you
we're
guys
all
send us a ticket about Calpads is moving slow, please understand that we are victims of Calpads ourselves. It doesn't go any faster for us either.
and this is just the test environment. So please bear with us for just a few seconds here. Okay, so we have again the certification error summary. I click on show and it gives me a list of errors. So we have 45 students triggering a CERT 140. So let's just look at one student here. So notice under this section, you have the SSID, you have the special education meeting ID. Okay, so as Nate mentioned earlier, the meeting ID is essential when troubleshooting errors. So if you have a student with multiple SPED records and multiple SSRV records, it is important that when before you go to this student's detail section, copy this SSID that the error is triggering and then click on the SSID to bring up the student details. So I guess this is my record. um,
I snuck that in on you.
so there you go. So we have here special education, and then we have here student services, right? So this is what I'm saying. If the error has this specific amendment identifier, you need to copy this because once you go to the student detail and you have a plethora of records, you won't be able to find the offending record just by looking at it. So what we do is I copy and then I do a control find. Okay. And now it highlights the errors. Okay. So I have here a SPED record, but then this student, this record is triggering a CERT 140 because it's missing the SSRV. So,
I think it's the opposite. The SSRV's
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
populated
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
there's
you're
not
right.
a valid SPED record.
There you go. Thank you, Nate. So it's the opposite. I was referring to CERT 142. So here is CERT 140. It's stating that you have SSRVs submitted to Calpads, but there's no specific um, SPED record. So looking at this record, I did a copy paste and I have the SSRVs, offending SSRVs, but then I also have a SPED record. So, the record is there. So again, if you see this, go back to the error list and read the error read back and see what you miss on the error description. So it's saying here that SSRV records must have an associate SPED record where when the education plan type is 100, 150, or 200, or if the meeting type is 10, 15, and 20. So these are the conditions I need to see: 100, 150, or 200. So going back here, oh, and then what else? 10, 15, and 20 for the meeting type. So going back here, I do have a 100 IEP that meets the definition, but then looking at the matching SPED record, it turns out that the special education meeting type code is a 40, a triennial. So if we go back to the error, it just requires it for a 10, 15, and 20, but not a 40. So you've essentially submitted SSRVs for students that you reported with the 40. So what are, um, how do you approach this? So either you have to report an annual or
Or
a 10, 15, or 20, or if it's really a triennial, go here and delete those offending SSRV records. So those
so,
are the two ways to um, resolve this. Do you
and
have
if I
a
may,
yeah?
yeah, if I may, this is where we want to emphasize the importance of critical thinking and understanding the data that was submitted. You can see the triennial evaluation has a special education meeting date right next to it of 10/25, 2019, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can see right below it, uh, oh, I thought that was going to be a annual. So
No,
you do not have a corresponding annual.
annual.
And so
Yeah,
most likely you're going to have to submit a corresponding annual because often the triennials and the annuals are held the same day. The student is determined eligible through the evaluation. That's the triennial. And then at the same time, we're going to update the services, right? And so that would be a corresponding annual on the same date. What you're going to have to do, regardless, is delete because
you will have a new meeting ID.
right, you're going to
Yeah,
delete these records from these service records that don't have a corresponding annual. Then you're going to submit the SPED record, that's the annual that corresponds with that triennial meeting, and then those associated services in the SSRV after the SPED record. It's, what, like we said, it's critical thinking, understanding how Calpads functions with your API, and how your SED
business
system
rules.
works.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, your
yeah.
SED system works because they all may be different. And unfortunately, we don't have access to a SED system. We don't even get to play with one. So, how you report your triennials that are held the same day as your annuals, or if it's one big meeting in real life, and then you divide them out just for reporting purposes, um, that nuance of it is unknown to us. And that's, the value of your expertise, and where we can't help you, right? We know the Calpads end, but there's going to be a black hole, so to speak, of knowledge on our part. And so you have to know how to bridge those two systems. And as we could talk about, you know, data leadership or collaboration, that communication between the SED submission and the Calpads person, because you have a whole ecosystem. You have at least 3 different systems involved in this one error. So that's, we try to demonstrate it was a little bit fast. I promise the YouTube video is a little bit more deliberate and explanatory, but we don't have 30 minutes as part of this 2-hour training to go over the CERT 40, which.
Yeah. So there are in the video, Nate discussed all the scenarios that might trigger a CERT 140 and also the steps that you should take. So yeah, so we will look at the YouTube videos as well for troubleshooting. And I promise we will add this on the end of year portion of the user manual too. So that way, if you click on the error, it should bring up that video as well at the bottom. So yeah, so assuming you've corrected all the errors, again, we're just showing you tools. It's basically up to you getting your feet wet, getting your hands dirty, looking at all the nitty-gritty stuff of the data, which essentially takes time. So you have to, if you have time, we recommend you start early. That way, you are able to look at your data better. You are able to coordinate with your SPED folks as well as your school sites with regards to the student scenario, because those take time. Reviewing the data takes time, and so start early and be proactive with these errors. So once you've certified and all the errors are, you have to wait. I mean, once you've corrected all the errors, of course you have to wait for a new snapshot to run, and then that should bring down the errors to zero. Once you have a new create date, revision ID, and your errors are down to zero, even your warnings are down to zero if you are really into the data accuracy stuff, then you can then go and review the certification reports. So you have here 5 cert aggregate reports that you need to review, each one representing different aspects of data. So you have your 16.1 to 16.9. These are your SPED students and the SPED related data. 17.3 and its list. 17.4 is for your SPED PSTS data that you surveyed. So the new elements here this year is the 16.9 and 16.10, and this is based on the exits that you used for your students for your SPED students essentially. And speaking of exits, let me just highlight another tool you should go in. So if you're getting errors about exits, um, the valid code combinations document also has this section with regards to the appropriate exits you could use for different plan types. And yeah, so if you have cert errors or submission errors about the exits you're reporting, go to this section to determine the allowable exits that you need to
The
um,
and the
that you may report.
Calpads FAQ has a great resource on when it's appropriate to exit a student. Oftentimes, that's the biggest hurdle is we transition right from exiting students from their program as much as from their school. Right, most of the time, the student only needs to be exited when they're not eligible for special education services. And for years, that wasn't the case, right? There was transfers, like the student transferred to a different school. That's a lot of those codes have been removed. There may be only 3 to 4 valid exit reasons in the valid code combinations document now. And so I would go to the Calpads FAQ. I think Kyron has it down in front of you. I always just look for exit Kyron, and then it says like 30 something results. And then I just go down to the special education portion, and it tells you when a student should be exited and which code to use.
There you go. So yeah, this is on the FAQ. It's important also. I learned this from our resident presenter driver, Alex. So you have to click on expand all for you to be able to do a control find. That way it would otherwise you just have collab. You just have just these links being looked at. But if you do expand all
Well, if
and
you
type
don't do
exit.
expand all,
Mm-hmm.
go back to collapse version, Kyron,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you scroll down, these are the questions,
Yeah,
and it will take you to the special education portion where it has exit.
there you go. So
See
yeah.
down, and that's faster.
Mm,
See,
okay, so
I'm
there you go.
Kyron's guru, guys.
So I told you Nate is the guru, not he's just too humble to admit. So again, once you've reviewed all the reports, now you can just, a button will appear that you need to check. You're essentially checking your life, telling Calpads that your end of year 4 data is accurate, and an LA approved button will appear. Once you click on that, then Calpads will then send a notification to the SELPA that you have an LA approved status, and they should then be able to review that on their part, and the SELPA on their part will then look at your reports, and if everything pans out, then they click on SELPA approved, and you're done for end of year. And with that, that's just the initial certificate. That's just the overview of the certification process. And I believe, Nate, do you want to discuss the different reports? At least give descriptions of the reports in detail. Okay, Nate, I see the EOY for reports section.
Yep, I was just on mute talking to myself for a while.
Okay.
I guess I lose my guru title that fast. Okay, so